Helpful for life.
After you've prepped your ingredients, there's one other vital aspect to cooking: flavoring your food. Now, flavor comes from a variety of different factors, and I started out trying to contain them within a few buckets, but I quickly realized that there could be, and probably are, whole courses on how taste works. So instead, I'm going to list off a bunch of factors and then dive into a couple of them. This isn't meant to be a complete scientific work, it's just meant to make you think about some of the factors that affect flavor so you can keep them in mind as you're cooking. Here goes: texture, temperature, time of day, where you are, who you're with, your mood, past experience with the food, memories about a food, how food sounds, the smell of the food, the smell of the area. Whew. I could go on, but you get the point. There's a lot of things that affect taste. There's a Netflix series I really liked called Salt, Fat, Acid, and Heat. It stars the chef Samin Nosrat, and I probably butchered her name, sorry Samin, who wrote a cookbook and then made a Netflix series for it. In it, she talks about how she traveled the world tasting food of all different varieties, and she came to the realization that all food has 4 main elements to it: salt, fat, acid, and heat. It's a really interesting Netflix series. I haven't looked at the book yet, but you should check it out. Her work is a definite inspiration here. All that being said, let's focus on a handful of things that you can more easily control: raw ingredients, salt, fat, acid, seasonings, marinating, cooking, pairing, presentation, and unwanted sources. Let's dive into those more specifically. So, raw ingredients. Obviously, the ingredients you use are going to affect the flavor of your food. The fresher the produce is, and if it's picked in season, it can taste so much better than frozen or canned produce can. That beautifully marbled Wagyu steak is going to taste much better than that super cheap steak from the grocery store. Of course, there's always going to be a balance between high quality ingredients and costs, but it's important to be aware of what you're working with. If you're working with the lower quality ingredients, you may have to do a little bit more to make them taste delicious. Whereas the high quality ingredients may just taste delicious all by themselves. What about salt? Well, salt obviously can add some saltiness to your food, but it does so much more than that. It can affect moisture, unlock flavors, preserve food, affect texture, be a binding agent, affect color, and probably even more than that. For all these reasons, there will likely be at least a little salt in most everything that you cook or eat. What about fat? Well, fat can be used both for flavor and as a cooking agent. If you've tasted a buttery croissant or eaten some focaccia, you've had food that prominently features the flavor of fat. If you've ever eaten anything roasted or fried, you've experienced some of the deliciousness that fat helps achieve. And of course, there's the naturally occurring fat in food. Think of that well-marbled steak again. So juicy. Acid. Acid adds a brightness to food. The sharpness of flavor cuts through the fat and other flavors of the food. If you don't regularly add acid to your food, you should reconsider. Add a squeeze of fresh citrus to your food right before serving it, and you'll realize that you can really wake up the flavors. Acid can be even used to cook food. If you've ever had ceviche, it's fish that's been cooked only with acid. No heat necessary. Seasoning. Now, seasonings arguably have the largest impact on your food, so we're going to dive a little deeper into seasonings in a separate section. Marinating. Similar to seasoning, marinating imparts flavor into your food by essentially soaking up the flavor prior to cooking. We're also going to dive a little deeper into that in a following video, and we have a whole separate mini course we're working on for marinades specifically. Cooking, or applying heat. That also has a very big impact on your food, so it has a separate video as well. Pairing. What food you pair together and even what drink you pair with your food can affect the taste. There's a reason some foods are served on the same plate. They just go well together. As for drinks, the obvious example you may have heard of is pairing different wines with different foods. When we were in Kentucky, we did a bourbon tasting where we tried the bourbon before and after eating some chocolate, and it was really cool to see just how different the bourbon tasted each time. Of course, there doesn't always have to be alcohol involved. What beverage can you think of that goes well with cookies or brownies? Presentation. You may be surprised to know that sight can actually affect taste. There's one famous experiment where people were given a glass of white wine with some flavorless red coloring added to it, and they started describing it as if it was a red wine. In other words, it can be worth it to spend a little extra time and effort to make your food look better because it can actually help it taste better. We have a whole section devoted to plating and presentation so your food can be picture-worthy and the taste will be that much more delicious. Unwanted sources. One unwanted source is something I'll call flavor seepage. The two main ways that I can think of that flavor seepage occur are from air and from touch. Some food will absorb odors out of the air. For example, flour can be like a sponge, so don't store it next to a cut onion. This is another reason why it pays to keep your fridge and freezer clean. The baking soda packs are even better because they will hopefully absorb that fishy smell before your food does. And of course, you should often store your food in airtight containers, especially if it's food with strong odors. Food can also absorb unwanted flavors by touching something contaminated. Whether it be a pan, utensil, or storage container, you need to keep those babies clean. If that plastic Tupperware is seeping old flavors into your food, throw it out. Another unwanted source that comes to mind is food that is spoiled. Whether it's molded or wilty, food that's gone bad can definitely taste bad.